Good morning. Happy Labor Day, y'all. Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. I apologize for starting a couple of minutes late. We had some tech issues there, but I appreciate everybody for rocking with us. If you're listening live on YouTube, hit us with a thumbs up, say good morning in the Toyota chat, all of that fun stuff. We're going to basically start getting into our in-season schedule here. We're going to be going live Mondays and Fridays. The plan, I believe, for the rest of the season will be Fridays at 11, Mondays at 2, so that I can go to the press conference on Monday mornings. Should be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot to talk about this fall. Obviously, we've got a lot to get into today. I'll be giving my post-game takeaways, my instant reaction, give some thoughts on the performance and the big picture lens, but also talk about some of the individuals, what went right, what went wrong, all of that. We'll give out helmet stickers, all the stuff you guys have been used to if you've been listening to the show the last couple of years. First things first, I will just say that it was a really fun week one slate. I think it's good for college football when you've got matchups like Texas and Ohio State going on, Bama, Florida State, Clemson, LSU. Especially when you get those games on campus, it's a lot of fun. Neutral sites just kind of remove the spirit of what makes college football unique. Kicking off at 9:10 p.m. Mountain Time, maybe not as fun for the fan base. That was a little frustrating. I know I'm getting old. I can handle 9 p.m. hoops games, but college football games are just so long. You've got so many media timeouts. Those instances where it's like you go to a commercial break, punt, commercial break, 2-minute break, just like every 5 minutes. It gets under your skin just a little bit more on those late night kickoffs. I will say this game was probably validating for both sides of the fence in terms of where you came into the season. I think if you came in with optimistic hopes, there were some plays that were made that would have validated that. I think if you came in thinking it's going to be the same old, what we've seen under Norvell, with BFN to this point, there were some moments that were more on that side of things as well. It was a bit of a mixed bag. I will say I was proud of the fight that they showed. I mean, that game was there for the taking. You're tied at 21 apiece halfway through the third quarter. Realistically, if you're being honest with yourself, just about everyone would have taken that coming in. Nobody in the world gave this team a shot to go into Husky Stadium, win that game. They've won 21 straight at home. They're incredibly athletic, all of that. So I just wanted to see CSU throw some punches. And obviously losing sucks, like especially when you're there and the game is there for the taking and you're in it and a couple of key plays swing it. Like it's never going to not sting a little bit when you lose the game that was there for the winning. But I just think if we're being real with ourselves, we saw what we wanted to see from this team, which was to see some guys step up, to make some plays on both sides of the football, to keep it interesting, to compete, and to be able to leave with your head held high. And I understand that in a 12-game season, moral victories only go so far. It's not like baseball. It's not like some of these other sports where you can just basically write off a matchup altogether. Every game has so much value that it's tough to just completely overlook a result. And I get that. But like you're 22-point dogs for a reason. And you see the level of athleticism that Washington has in the secondary, especially. Felt like the receivers had a really tough time getting open in this game. You see what Damon Williams is able to do as a dual threat guy, his ability to improvise and extend the play. I mean, it was a tough matchup. And yes, I would have loved to have seen CSU pull off the upset, but I'm just glad that it wasn't an instance like Texas where you basically just roll over and punt on the week altogether. You show nothing. There's nothing you can leave that game really feeling good about other than, I guess, like Justin Marshall at 100 yards rushing or whatever it was. Scheduling is a tough balance right now. I wrote about this post game. I've been asked a lot. if perennially being 0-1, it's the 8th straight year that CSU's lost the week 1 matchup. If perennially starting 0-1, if it's worth it, I can't sit here and be like I have all the answers, because it is such a tricky balance when you're in the Mountain West and you're trying to offset the gap in revenue between the bigger leagues. And when you can make 1.5 million for this one matchup and you're going to make like 3.5 to 4 for your entire Mountain West slate, it's hard for me to argue that logically it doesn't make sense to do this, like especially if you want to have any chance of swimming in these bigger waters. Like, you just need the revenue, point blank, period. At the same time, and I've talked about this before, I don't think that when you always start 0-1, it does a lot to help your cause in terms of capitalizing on the preseason excitement. There's always the buildup leading up to week 1. The possibility is still on the table at that point. Everything is still on the table in the preseason. That's what makes it so magical. And then oftentimes over the last decade, before really even halftime, a lot of that excitement has completely gone out the window. And I don't think this was that instance. Like, to me, this was closer to what CSU did in 2013 or 2017, where they went down to Tuscaloosa and they competed with Bama. And I understand that this Washington team is not the number 1 team in the country. It's not going and playing Texas or anything like that. But I do think they're going to be really solid in the Big Ten. I think they're going to be a top 25 team. And I think they've got some really impressive athletes that are pretty tough matchups. And I just want everyone to keep that in perspective. When I get into my takeaways, the standouts and all that, that's not to say that you walk away feeling like it was a perfect outing, that you didn't leave anything on the table. I felt like really in every phase of the game, there were about 2-3 key plays that kind of swung things a couple times defensively, where you generate some pressure in the backfield and then you let Damon Williams slip out. We talked about that a lot going into the game, how big it was going to be to keep him contained within the pockets. You had to have sound rush lanes, and there were some instances where that really burned CSU. That the tackling's got to be better. At the same time, like, Williams is a really impressive rusher, and then Coleman's just a stud. I believe he led the NCAA in like percentage of his yards gained last year coming after contact. Like, he's just a freak. They've got a pair of 6'4" corners that are both going to go to the league. Davis might be, a top 15 pick next year. Like, they've got a ton of talent, and CSU went into that setting, a place where they're really good. Obviously, they'd won 20 straight coming in, and the Rams landed some punches. And, like when the final bell rung or whatever, you still had to sit there and watch them celebrate with the belt. They're still the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, but you went the distance in this one. You're leaving with your chin held high. Maybe you're bloodied and bruised a little bit, but you still got your pride intact, which is a far cry from a lot of the results we've seen in week 1, over the last decade. Really, you got to go back to like 2018 to even find a week 1 matchup that was remotely competitive. And that was still a frustrating game because you gave up like 50 to Hawaii. So it has traditionally not been a week that's gone very well for CSU. I do feel like Damon Williams is the best quarterback that the Rams are going to encounter all year, just in terms of his skill set, his ceiling athletically. I said that in the preseason. I felt like that was confirmed with what we saw from him in this one. Made some really impressive throws with pass rushers in his face. His ability to, like we said, extend the play and make plays in the open field it's just on another level. You're not going to see another athlete like him under center this year. Running back, I think there's a decent chance that's probably the best back you faced as well. I mean, Sire Gaines, there's going to be a couple of solid backs that you have to go up against, but just, really pointing out like how tough this is. David Boston is a freak athlete. Like, they've got some playmakers and they made some plays. What I thought was encouraging from CSU side of things is you saw some guys that you had high hopes for coming into the year step up and do the same. Jalen Dupree was awesome. We knew he was going to be solid this year, but this was why he earned that number 1 spot, despite the fact that you had Justin Marshall coming back and you bring Lloyd Avant over in the portal. And, he looks exciting in the return game. Jaxxon Warren, Owen Long, a lot of these guys that we had been talking about pretty consistently in the preseason and highlighting, coming in, those guys all stepped up. We'll talk about Braden here in a couple of minutes. I do feel like it was a mixed bag. I think, the folks that already have the pitchforks ready there were some plays you saw in this one that was fuel for your fire. You know, the mechanical stuff, throwing off the back foot. Probably missed a deep throw early in the first that, if nothing else, was a huge gain, but could have been 6. The interception, you know, maybe could have got it into Maher if he stepped up and made that throw, but I think more so it was a bad read. Had Warren, you know, wide open on the crosser underneath. That's going to happen, though, guys. Like, quarterbacks are going to make mistakes. They're going to make throws. Yes, there are times where I get frustrated that I feel like he still struggles with some of the same stuff that he struggled with a couple of years ago. I also feel like this was a matchup where the wide receivers really didn't do a ton to help the cause, and that's not to say that they suck or they're going to be bad. But again, like when you're a 5'11" receiver like Jordan Ross, and you're going up against 6'4" Takario Davis, and they're playing man straight up against you, like it's going to be a challenge, and it was for CSU. The passing offense was inconsistent. I like that they had some success, though, with those crossers underneath. I like that they attacked the middle of the field with the tight ends. A lot of things that we highlighted and wanted to see. And while I can point to a couple things that if I want to fixate on and be hypercritical of, I could. But to me, like the same people that fixate on those 1 or 2 negatives, they also don't give credit for the solid work that he did leading the scoring drives. You know, really all 3 of them made some big throws, sometimes on 3rd down, a couple times on 4th down. You know, like, again, it's a mixed bag. You would have needed a better performance out of him if CSU was going to pull this upset. I think that's fair to say. Like, he didn't deliver an all-time performance, a legacy game or something like that. It also wasn't a train wreck like some people are trying to imply. And I just think if we're being honest and we're being fair, like, let's give it a couple weeks and see how they do against much more comparable levels of athleticism. And in some instances, CSU is probably going to have a pretty big advantage there. Like, yes, I would love to see this offense earn some style points against Greeley, you know, this weekend, really run it up, not because I'm eager to try and embarrass UNC or anything like that. But I just think that it can't be like what we saw against UTEP and even in that UNC matchup last year. Like, I do think you've got to come out and you've got to earn some style points, but like we kind of always knew that was going to be the case, right? Like, the hope going into this game was to be competitive. Sure, you'd love to see them pull the upset, but realistically, the hope was to do what they did, to land some blows, to show, to leave with your head, you know, held high. And then, you know, UTSA and Wazoo and UNC to an extent, like, these were going to be the games that were going to dictate the tone of the season. And I felt that coming in. I still feel that now. UTSA looks a little scary. They certainly held their own against Texas A&M. They struggled a little bit on the road last year. Did not struggle in that one. McCown's probably the second best quarterback that the Rams are going to play this year. So, I mean, you're getting those right off the bat here. But I think there's a lot of positives, and we're going to get into all of that here as the show goes on. Last thing I'll just say in the instant reaction here, the fake field goal was unique, to say the least. It failed spectacularly, very easy to mock online, but that's kind of the deal with trick plays. Like, they either work and everybody hypes you up as a genius, oh, they never saw that coming, what a unique design, or it just is a train wreck and it goes like how this one went and everyone's like, oh, you idiot. But like, that's kind of the risk you run when you run a play like that. I'll have to ask. I don't think that Hankins was the intended receiver. To me, I think you're probably sending him deep, just trying to catch the attention of a safety, get somebody to come over, and then you have Rocky Beers kind of slip out there. To me, that's a design that makes a lot more sense, and had it worked, it would have looked really brilliant. But it didn't. It was ugly. It was one of the key plays in the second half that, you know, prevented you from, you know, really making this interesting and putting Washington on upset alert over the final 15 minutes. But for 3 quarters, you were there, you hung with them, you made plays on both sides. And I saw what I wanted to see, to feel like this team has an opportunity to make some noise in the Mountain West, to build off of what they did last year. I still think this team can be better than the team a year ago. Maybe, you know, that's the optimist in me. Maybe I'm just itching to get hurt again. Who knows? I guess we shall see. But I'm intrigued by some of the young talent they have on both sides of the football, some playmakers, guys like Dupree, Owen Long. We'll get into all of that. Let's take a quick break real quick. Let's shout out a couple of our partners, and then we will keep this rolling. All right, we've got NFL action, which I'm just stoked about a lot. Like I said, going into last week, I'm just tired of living in hypotheticals when it comes to the Broncos. I think they're going to win the division. We'll see. It's been Kansas City's for like 9 straight years. So definitely still runs through there, but I just like what they did in the offseason. I think Mile High is going to have the magic again, that you could feel the atmosphere return to the stadium last year in a way that just hadn't been the case really going back to 2015 or so. And if you want to experience that, there's no better way than with our friends at Game Time. I think give the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing tickets and experiences in a few taps. Incredibly easy to use. The Game Time guarantee means you can trust 100% authentic tickets. Plus, the fees are always included, so you don't get hit with a bunch of last-minute charges. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking for gear to take your brand to the next level, to make them stand apart from the crowd, Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear. Start your order. Their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel that you need. They've got a partnership with CSU as part of their on-campus collection. As you can see in the background here, got one of the awesome Branded Bills hats that I have. Got a couple of them now, wear them all the time. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your order. All right. I appreciate everybody rocking with us in the Toyota chat. Let's keep it rolling here. Let's keep the takeaways going. Let's get into some key stats, all of that stuff. I did just briefly, before we kind of talked about, the run game, the pass game, I wanted to touch on play calling, because I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter, and I said this earlier, but I'm going to really try not to run in circles this season with those that disagree with me, that those, that went into this matchup and we're just going to be upset no matter what happened. They very realistically could have gotten rolled, and they would have, been furious about that, or CSU plays better than expected, but a couple of plays, don't go their way, and then, they're furious about that. It's a miserable existence. That's not to say you shouldn't have standards. That's not to say that you shouldn't strive for more. And again, I think this team has a chance to be pretty good this year, pretty dang fun. But there are just some folks who, that's how they consume sports. They want like the angry Boston, New York radio, Chicago hot takes, at halftime, me come on here, fire everybody. This kid sucks. What a moron. And context doesn't matter. Logic doesn't matter. It's just, here's my hot take. Hear me roar. And it's just not the way I'm going to operate. I will say, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of Dupree in the second half. The problem is the game, the way it played out, it didn't really work out that way from a pacing standpoint. First of all, CSU had trouble getting off the field defensively. They were pretty much gassed, and I'm not blaming them. It was a tough matchup, especially week one. But they kind of ran out of gas. Washington was on the field for about 11 minutes in that third quarter. CSU touched the ball twice. He turned it over on the first time. They didn't really have an opportunity to get the ball back. On top of that, Washington, they're really stacking the box. They're basically daring you to throw, and CSU was trying to get that passing game in a rhythm. It was all set up, to build off of the run game. And against a defense like Washington, CSU wasn't really able to do that. That's disappointing. But I think, again, you play against more comparable competition, you're probably going to have some more success there. On top of that, Dupree, he had 15 carries in this one. I would have been comfortable with him being around that 20 carry mark, but much more than that, I think would be reckless and irresponsible. Even if he's running the ball like, a beast the way he was, averaging 6 yards a pop. It's week one, guys. And he's, coming off of a year in which he got injured. I believe, had like spine surgery this past winter. Like he's a guy you want to certainly heavily feature within the offense, but you don't want to go overboard. If you missed it, Jay told Kevin Lytle post-game that Justin Marshall had gotten dinged up in camp, missed about a week, probably a little bit, behind, still getting into shape and whatnot. That's why we didn't see him in this game. Would assume that we see more of him moving forward. Armani Winfield was there, did not play. Not sure if he got dinged up in practice, coming in. Could be disciplinary thing? Who knows? We'll see this week. Maybe we find out today in Jay Norvell's press conference. But I just kind of wanted to address both of those. Didn't run the ball with as much success in that second half, but really, really encouraging what we saw out of Dupree in that first half. Washington had no answers for him. He's ripping the ball, at one point for like 8-9 yards a pop, still finished, with an average of 6 yards a carry. There's a reason I'd been pounding the table for this kid. I'm telling you, buy stock now. He is the truth. This is the best back that CSU has had in quite some time, and this is the deepest backfield that the Rams have had since at least 2017. And I think they've got more versatility. It was a pretty versatile group in 2017, smash and dash kind of with Dalen and Izzy, and then Marvin was kind of a home run hitter. Sort of a similar dynamic, I suppose. Avant more of a scat back, whereas, Dupree, kind of your traditional bell cow 3-down type back. His combination of speed and balance, it stands out. Like he's so smooth running the ball out there. He hits the hole hard, but he's got great vision and he's patient, and it's just everything you would want a running back. I'm really excited about him. But you don't want to give him the ball 40 times week one. Like I was talking to Kyle Bell. What was it? The year that he got hurt? I think it was 2005 or 2006. He had like 44 carries in week one, had like 100 carries in the first couple of weeks, and he was just done after that. He was never the same. You got to remember, like, you don't play preseason games in college football. Yes, you've got scrimmages to an extent, but you can't really simulate or replicate the type of physicality that you're going to go up against, an actual opponent, especially an opponent of Washington's caliber. And like, yes, if you had the possession a little bit more in the third quarter, I do think we would have seen Dupree get over that 100-yard mark. He would have gotten a couple of more carries, but I really didn't have beef with the play calling. And I thought what they did schematically made sense based on, what Washington was kind of throwing at them at the time. Had some success in the ground game early. Washington adjusted. CSU tried to counter. Didn't really work out. That's going to happen. That's part of football. It's not Madden. And I think we just oversimplify it sometimes. Like, just run Dupree 45 times. All right, well, he is a human being. And again, it's week one. That's all I'm saying. We got into it a little bit earlier, but the passing offense as a whole just left a lot to be desired. I think some of that has to do with the quality and the athleticism of the defense that you're going up against. I think some of it has to do with it being week one and, the timing just being kind of off. There were a couple of times where I felt like Braden maybe could have stepped up and really, driven through on some of those throws instead of kind of throwing off of his back foot. I'm not a quarterback coach. I'm also not out there in the moment trying to do this. I clearly think he has plenty of arm strength, and it was on display. Again, like as much as we hyperfixate on 1 to 2 plays, like you could also point out that throw he had to Taj Bullock for about 16 yards on the first drive was a dot. I mean, that was a missile. I don't know how he fit that in there. Maybe even kind of a questionable decision, just given the tight coverage, but he ripped that shit in there. A couple of throws up the seam to Warren were solid. Like, he made some plays in this game. I thought he got in a rhythm there late in the first half. I thought the execution of the 2-minute drill after Washington fumbles, which was a massive break, young quarterback, miscommunication with his center. But to CSU's credit, they took advantage of it. You got the break of a turnover very easily, considering Washington got the ball in the second half, could have been 28-7. Instead, you're gifted this magical opportunity. You go down and you capitalize on it and you score. And it would have been huge to get a stop out of the break there. Washington kind of going right down the field. To me, that there was some writing on the wall. I was kind of like, well, either CSU wins an old school, shootout 44-37 or something like that, or, the best may have already come in this matchup. But, CSU responded again. They go down, they score, they get Jaxxon Warren involved. They convert on a couple of fourth downs. Took some stones from Norvell to go for it at midfield at that point. I mean, if you don't get it, everybody's going to be scratching their head and questioning what you did. But I think, these receivers are going to stand out more in the coming weeks. I really like that they got Warren involved, because I think the ability to attack the middle of the field is just going to open up so many different things for this offense. And while it's easy, to look at the 1 or 2 plays that were frustrating and didn't go wrong. Like there was a lot to build off of in this matchup against a really quality defense. Yes, they're going to need more from a veteran quarterback. CSU will only reach its ceiling this year if Braden elevates his game, if he reaches a level that we have not yet seen out of him consistently. And consistency is going to be kind of the big key for this passing offense as a whole. But that's not just on him. That's on your young offensive line. That's on your receivers to get open. Guys like Jordan Ross really didn't factor into this matchup at all. And again, like when you're going up against 6'4" Takario Davis, it's tough. But you would have liked to have seen those guys make a little bit more of an impact. Maher really seemed to be the only receiver that got open with any type of consistency. Lanier made a couple of plays, had a chance when CSU turned it over on downs late. I felt like to catch that ball. It was maybe a little bit short, but slipped. There were just like 2-3 plays here or there where they were a little bit off that kind of greatly changed things. And then, obviously the interception was tough. I felt like the turning point of the matchup was that drive. You can point to the interception. You could also point to the play right before that where Jaxxon Warren gets tackled, doesn't get the PI flag. Now, you're in 3rd and long or 4th and long, whatever it was, and you're trying to force something at that point and make a play. You end up turning it over. The defense, to their credit, gets basically a stop based on the field position. You hold them to 3. But yeah, the uncalled PIs did not help the cause. There are factors you can point to. But I point all of this out because I think we, again, oversimplify it, and it's all on the quarterback. And there's not a position more where you're under a more significant microscope than QB. And it's not to say that, we aren't hoping to see more. That's just to say that I think if you throw in the towel after week 1, it might be a bit of an oversimplification and a bit of an overreaction. If it's still the case, 4 weeks from now, and we're still seeing, the passing offense be erratic and there just doesn't seem to be much chemistry between him and the guys outside, that can be an issue. Some people, they theorize that if you don't have like a true number one like Torrey, even if you have a good group of receivers, I think Bud Elliott has this take. It's essentially like kind of if you've got multiple quarterbacks, you've got no quarterbacks. If you don't have a number one quarterback, or if you don't have a number one receiver, you're going with the receiver by committee approach, then you don't really have a difference maker out there. I'd never really thought about it that way, but it's possible. I'm still really high on Jordan Ross, on Lanier and some of these guys. I do think, once they can get Antwi out on the field, hopefully Armani Winfield, again, we'll kind of see what happens there with all of that. I think this passing offense it's got a lot more potential than what we saw in this one. And I think part of the problem was just the disparity in time of possession. I mean, Washington ran 75 plays in this game. CSU ran 60. Like, that's a significant difference. And then, if you come out there and you try and get the passing game in rhythm and you're not running the ball with any success at that point, again, Washington kind of stacking the box in the second half, you go a couple of incomplete passes, you get off the field quick when your defense is gassed at that point and they can't get off the field and Washington's going on these big, long drives. It all kind of compounds together, and that's how it goes from, being 21-21 to a 17-point game. You still covered, which I think was encouraging. It reminded me a little bit of the final outcome of when CSU went to Alabama in 2013, where, it's a game that's right there for the taking. You have a turnover, all of a sudden you look up, you end up losing 31-6. Made a lot more plays in this one offensively than you did in that game. But I think we're going to see more Rocky Beers. I think Jordan Ross, I think a lot of these guys are going to show a lot more than what they showed in this matchup against a very athletic Washington defense. I thought the O-line looked pretty encouraging, gave up some pressure at times. But like in that setting for a young group that doesn't have a ton of continuity, I was impressed with them. It wasn't like you had a ton of procedural issues or a ton of big plays wiped out for holding or anything like that. Actually, I don't think CSU got called for holding in this game, if I remember correctly. A couple of illegal formations, like where you didn't have the tight end lined up right and stuff like that, but they cleaned it up. There wasn't really much of that in the second half at all. Defensively, made some plays. I think the aggressive mentality will pay off in the long run. It's kind of a double-edged sword, especially against somebody as dynamic as Damon Williams. Like you send pressure and you make some plays, you get a couple of sacks, which proved to be key and allowed you to get off the field. Without those plays, I mean, this very easily could have been like, Texas, where you're just giving up 50 something points and getting throttled. I think the aggressive mentality was part of why this was a game. It was also part of why you gave up some big plays, because you weren't able to keep them contained. Some receivers, make a guy or two miss, and then you give up a big play here or there. But overall, I liked what I saw. I think, the secondary was maybe a tad slow at times. It's going to maybe happen in week one. It's also going to happen when you're going against a pretty good crew of receivers, and you're so worried about the run game. Like that's the tough part when Coleman's, and he had an awesome game as well. But when he's running the ball with the type of consistency that he was able to, puts you in a pretty tough spot. I do feel like not having Gabe Jones in the second half, you felt that. He's one of CSU's best linemen, especially in the interior. But I think there's stuff to build off of. I'm going to get into some key stats. We'll highlight some individuals here. Keep the questions, comments rolling. But let me shout out a couple of partners real quick. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering whether you're conquering the world by going off-road, whether you're cruising around town, going around Cap Hill, something like that, Toyota has a model for you. They've got 17 vehicles with all-wheel drive. They've got more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker. And they've got 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Coors Light encourages you to never lose your chill. It's easy to do so, especially in the college football slate, especially when you're doing yard work. Spent like 2.5 hours, before all the action started on Saturday, pulling out vine weed and all kinds of like intrusive stuff. Really tests your patience, really makes you wonder if it's all worth it or not, or if you should just let the thing die. But you put in the hard work, you feel good about yourself, you accomplish something, then you feel like you earn that ice cold Rocky Mountain water. You know the deal. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold packaged, and cold filtered for that smooth taste. When the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Make the most of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I see some comments here in the Toyota chat regarding body language or reaction to mistakes from BFN. This isn't the first time I've seen people be critical of that. He tends to smile like after he throws an interception or something like that. I think that's just his way of trying to compartmentalize the moment. Obviously, he's frustrated in that instance. It's not like he doesn't care. Like he's not a competitor. Like he's not a warrior. I don't know. Like what's the alternative? Throw your helmet and throw a temper tantrum. Like I don't think that is any more productive in the moment. I don't know. Like I get what people are saying, but I think we're maybe reading into too much of a TV camera glancing on somebody, and we're not, on the sidelines hearing the conversations that are going on. If you watch this dude, like he is highly competitive. I feel like at times, man, like this ends up being the J Mike defends BFN show, and that's like not to say that he's above criticism or that there aren't elements of his game that frustrates me. That, again, some of these things mechanically, like at this point of his career, I would like to see him not do that. It's great that he has the ability to throw off platform. But the problem is when you're doing it unnecessarily and you're missing throws that are on the table, that's where it becomes an issue. And a couple of times in this game, it was. A couple of other times he stepped up and he ripped it, and we saw that arm talent on display. There was a play where it was 3rd and long where they had him roll out, and it was kind of a little comeback route from Maher. I mean, it's a tough throw to the far sideline on the move, and he ripped it. Like he can do some pretty special things. And I guess that's what confuses me is there's just there's no balance when it comes to the commentary with Braden. The fans have just gotten so hypercritical that like they've kind of made up their mind, I think. And that's fine. That's fine. That's not to say that he doesn't need to be better, but I don't know. I just get confused, I guess, by some of the hypercriticism and some of the lack of acknowledgement with what he's able to do, and also just the recognition of the fact that he is the best option that CSU has in that building. I promise you, based on what we've seen in practice, he is by far the best bet. That's where I'm at with all of it. Hoping to see a more dynamic passing offense. I'd like to see them build off of some stuff play action wise. I'd like to see them have Braden roll out more and take advantage of that athleticism. I know one of the times he didn't, he took kind of a self sack, and it's another instance where it's easy to meme without context. To me, who cares? Like, that's a play 2 years ago where maybe he forces a ball into coverage and it's a turnover and everybody's ripping him. He's trying to live to fight another day. Yes, you'd like to see him throw it away. It's hard when you're barreling towards the sideline and you've got somebody about to drill you in the chin. You lose 1 or 2 yards instead of turning it over. That's a win. Sometimes it's a win to just take the sack and then live to fight another day. And these fucking Monday morning quarterbacks with the screenshots on Twitter and former journalists that used to cover CSU, some of the commentary, just like, have you ever watched the sport before? Anyways, key stats: 26 first downs allowed. Washington, again, they had a 14-minute advantage in time of possession. The Rams couldn't get off the field. That factoring into a couple of short drives in the third quarter really compounded. When your opponent runs 75 plays, it's going to be tough. When you're 3 of 13 on third down offensively, it's going to be tough. And that's why there was such a significant disparity in time of possession, why Washington really was able to wear out that CSU defense, and why the Rams weren't ultimately able to pull off an upset in the end. Some encouraging numbers: CSU scored on both their red zone trips. You remember back a couple of years ago, early in the Norvell era, especially in the Adazio era, even at times under Bobo, though, the Rams would be the kings of moving the ball between the 20s, and then things would get stagnant in the red zone and we'd be settling for 30-yard field goals. Nothing makes me want to rip my hair out more. Settling for a 30-yard field goal annoys me significantly more than an interception. Interceptions are all different. Like, yes, if it's just a horrible decision, that's one thing. Sometimes you're trying to make a play. If you don't turn the ball over at all, you're not trying to make plays. That's kind of the paradox in all of it. When you get down, to those key spots, you've got to put points on the board, especially in this situation. And I felt like, that drive where you end early with a Taj Bullock touchdown, that's great. You end the half with a touchdown as well, where Jalen Dupree makes an incredible play. I saw some other people being like, wow, that was dumb. What if he got tackled? You still would have had time to clock it and get the field goal unit onto the field, assuming that was the plan, like had he gone down. But you give the ball to your best player, he makes a play, gives you an opportunity. Like, that's what you've got to do. You got to find ways to get the ball in the hands of your best guys, of Jaxxon Warren, of Jalen Dupree. Those guys in particular were able to do so. Now we need some of these other guys, Taylor Neer and Jordan Ross and Rocky Beers and Justin Marshall, if he's in the picture, and Winfield, if he's in the picture, like some of these guys to step up and make some plays as well. I like that it was equal turnover margin. As much as we fixated on one throw, it wasn't like they were out there, giving the game away. And then, 283 yards allowed on the ground. That can't be the norm. I don't think it will be. I think this is the most dynamic rushing duo that you're going to face over the course of the season. You're going to face some really good ones still. Like, Boise State's still going to run the hell out of the football. Everybody's dunking on them after they struggled against South Florida. They're still the front runner in the Mountain West. We'll do our power rankings on Friday. But if you think they're anything like lower than third at this point, I don't know. We'll see. Again, you can't overreact too much to week one. The player of the game, easy for me, Jalen Dupree, 15 carries for 92 yards, 1 touchdown. Love the graphic. Shout out to our wonderful super producer, Alyssa. He was awesome. He was everything we hoped he would be. He looked like an all-conference caliber running back. He looked like the type of player that could be in the conversation for Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. He is exactly what we thought he would be when he was recruited out of Malvern, Arkansas. And it's why, when we had seen him in practice, we're like, they got to find ways to get this guy involved, because from day one, it's just been clear he's got another level to him. He's just got a different amount of juice when he touches the football, and his size, his speed. He is a rare and special talent, and it was awesome to see him have this performance. I would also, do a huge shout out to Owen Long defensively. Those are probably, like, if I had to say, the 2 guys I was in the highest in the preseason, Warren and Dupree offensively, and then defensively it'd probably be Jaquez Evans and Owen Long. Owen Long was awesome in this game. 13 total tackles, 11 of which were solo. I was going to do co-players of the game, but there weren't any photos of Owen available. He's the best linebacker in the Mountain West. I seen all the teams in action at this point. There's a couple of good ones. San Diego State's got a few guys that can really go. Boise's got some talent there. Owen Long is a rare combination of athleticism and instincts. It's crazy to me that he's only played linebacker for a year. Like, he was a safety and a running back in high school. That's kind of CSU's vision, really is Owen Long. You can find guys that are freak athletes, have them put on some weight, teach them the position, they can thrive. His ability, though, sideline to sideline is insane. I feel like there were a couple of plays where if it weren't for him, containing the edge, it could have been a 30, 40-yard game for Damon Williams. AJ Noland had a really good game as well in his debut at safety. Had a couple of nice plays where he used the sideline to, force Williams out. Those guys are going to be playmakers over the course of the season. So helmet stickers for all of them. Helmet stickers for Taj Bullock, who caught a pass, had a pass attempt, and rushed for a touchdown in his first game, really leaning into that Taysom Hill role. Helmet stickers for Jaxxon Warren, who, over the last year has kind of just been a hypothetical at tight end. This year we saw the vision, 6 catches, 79 yards, 27-yard touchdown. I felt like there were a couple of plays where I'm drawing a blank on his name, the Washington safety, he had an awesome game. The FCS transfer that came up. He had a couple of really impressive open field tackles on Warren where he went low and was able to kind of sweep the legs. If it wasn't for that, though, I think Warren goes over 100 yards in this game. And I think there's going to be some plays this year where it's reminiscent of Crockett Gilmore against New Mexico circa 2013, where just running through arm tackles. Like, if you do not use perfect form on this dude, he is going to run through you. And that's the advantage of having a tight end that's 6'8". And we really didn't even see Rocky Beers unleashed. Like, I think there's still a lot to be unleashed when it comes to some of these offensive weapons. I'll give a helmet sticker to Tommy Maher. He had 4 catches. Love that he toughed it out, looked a little dinged up at one point, came back out there, made some big plays. You can tell that BFN trusts him. Like, right now, it kind of feels like Maher and Warren are his safety blankets, and that makes sense. Those are really talented guys. I think the key for this offense, again, is like getting some consistency from Jordan Ross, from Lanier, from Petey Tucker, from all those guys out wide. Whoever's out there, you just need someone to step up, get open, and make some plays. I am going to give some helmet sticker to BFN. I feel like he was largely responsible for 2 of those 3 scoring drives. Yes, the turnover was frustrating, bad timing, but he's also part of the reason they were in that game in the first place. It works both ways. Helmet stickers for Long and for AJ Noland. Helmet stickers for Robert Edmondson, who had 8 solo tackles and a sack. He's exciting coming off the edge, as is Lamondre Joe, as I saw somebody shout it out in the Toyota chat. Summers loves to bring those DB blitzes, off the edge. He sent Lamondre Joe a handful of times. He sent Dylan Phelps a couple of times, and they almost got home on 2 or 3 of them, where, again, like, it's week 1, you land on some of those, all of a sudden, this is a completely different game. But Lamondre Joe, a sack and a half. Great showing in week 1. Helmet sticker for Lloyd Avant via special teams, 50-yard kickoff return. And Brian Hansen, who had a 49-yard average as the starting punter for CSU. Braden actually had another great pooch punt. I'd be curious if I went back and looked through the numbers, what his stats are, because it feels like every time he does it, it's 40+ yards and down within the 5-yard line. Surprisingly really good at it. Admittedly opens up, the window for people to make sassy, sarcastic comment. Oh, he's a better punter than QB. I think everybody knows that I would push back on that, but it did make me snicker a little bit. Made me laugh a little bit, just being real. Lloyd Avant is going to break one this year, Josh says in the Toyota chat, calling it now. I think so too. He's a home run hitter, and he's why they brought him in, is basically for exactly that. And, to get him the ball in space offensively, quick screen, swing passes, stuff like that. He's got some ability to, make plays between the tackles too, but really that burst and that speed in the open field, like, that's what they're trying to take advantage of. Mount High Minute says, this is a solid team. I think we are a 9-10 win team. If we compete like we did against Washington every week, Norvell will be the man for the job. IMO. Lamar says, Boise State is not the threat they once were without Gianti. I think that's true. I think they've still got a really talented duo. Like Sire Gaines, Malik Sherrod, both of them put the ball on the ground against South Florida, but you also saw the burst, and those guys can go. They've got a pretty good offensive line. Like that run game is going to be solid. Again, don't get too overreactive. Like we need a little bit larger of a sample size. It's just what I'm saying. Josh says, I'm repeating myself a lot here, but the DL crashed way too hard. The OL just washed them out, and all the Husky running backs had to do was wait for the wash to clear, and they bounced it outside for 5-6 yards. Maybe a little bit over aggressive at times. Again, I also think that factored into some of the success that Damon Williams had, extending the play and getting out of the pocket. You've got to rush with integrity, and it can be a bit of a challenge, especially when you're overamped, especially when it's week one and you're trying to make a play. Oh, Josh says Dupree was just named the Mountain West Freshman of the Week. I think that makes sense based on the performance that he had in this one. Kind of moving on here. If you've got any more questions, comments, etc., throw them my way. I'll get to as many as we can. Need more out of the passing offense, just need more consistency. Some of that falls on Braden, some of that falls on the receivers, some of that falls on Norvell. But I think, again, against less talented DBs, we're going to see far more separation. We're going to see the passing offense get in a more consistent rhythm. I'm still very intrigued about what this can look like and the versatility that they have, because I think we only saw a small amount of it, more so in that first drive when you're putting Bullock all over the place. But I think there's a lot they can still do. The defense has got to tackle better, as Josh mentioned, at times maybe over pursuing, got to work on that. Other than that, like, I don't really think there's much more to be said about this. Like, in the grand scheme of things, you showed you can make some plays. You showed there's still some things that need to be cleaned up. It's week one. That's going to happen. We got a question here. Do you think if we kick that field goal instead of going for it, would the game be a different story? I don't know, man. I mean, it gives you 3 points in your favor. That was, at that point, it would have made it a touchdown game again, but I think it was on the outside range of what is realistic for Hankins. I think it would have been an upper 50s field goal. So I really don't hate the decision. It was just the execution wasn't there. And that's kind of the deal with trick plays. Like, when it works, everybody thinks you're a genius, how creative. They never saw that coming. And then when it doesn't work, when the execution's a little bit off, when communication isn't solid, it looks like the dumbest thing you've ever seen. And that's obviously what happened. I think with the schedule on the table, I think with what we've seen from the rest of the Mountain West, this is a team that should very much be in the mix at the top of the conference. Like, I think UNLV is going to improve as the year goes on. San Jose State, rough showing against Central Michigan. We'll see if they live up to the preseason hype or not. I had far more concerns about what I saw from them than what I saw from Boise, actually. I think all those teams are going to be right there in the mix. New Mexico actually looked a little frisky in their matchup against Michigan, who looked human, to be honest. But to show out in that setting was impressive for first-year staff and basically, no returning talent. But I feel very much validated based on the first 2 weeks of the season of picking CSU to be a top 2 team in this league. There was nothing I saw in this game that made me hit the panic button or think that, there's no reason the Rams can't compete against the Mountain West. Helps that the Mountain West doesn't look particularly dominant. But Washington State did not look great against Idaho. That UTSA game might actually be the tougher of the two. If you can go into the Mountain West slate with a 3-1 record, you open at San Diego State, who they moved the ball on Stony Brook. Good for you. We'll see how they look against a real team. I really feel like 4-1, 5-1, 6-1, like that type of start is on the table. And if you're able to pull that off, you're going to be right there in the mix at the top of the conference and hopefully, playing games that really matter come November. In terms of this being a successful season, I do think they have to build off of what they did last year. Like, I think if you went 8-4, you didn't go to the conference title game. I wouldn't say that's a failure of a season, as some maybe would, because I think teams like Wyoming and Air Force are much improved from a year ago. I think Hawaii is a good team, and Fresno is going to be tough, even if I don't think that they've got a ton of high-end athletic talent offensively at the moment. Like you're playing a tougher league slate than you did a year ago, top to bottom. That's for certain. I think the non-conference slates maybe slightly more manageable, with a lot of respect still for Owen, McCown, and UTSA. But everything's still on the table for this team. Don't throw in the towel just yet. Now, if you struggle against Greeley, if you get your ass kicked at home by UTSA and can't compete with Washington State, that's a different story. Now, all of a sudden, you're 1-3, and this season is on the verge of falling apart. Now, you still could run the table in the league slate at that point. Hypothetically, I get it, but the likelihood of that is probably not great. What you do in these next 3 weeks, which was basically always going to be the case outside of pulling off a miracle and upsetting a team that you were 22-point underdogs to, these next 3 weeks were always going to be what decided if this was going to be the type of season we wanted or not. Now, they've got to keep it up, obviously, after that. Like, you could go 3-0 and then have a disastrous conference slate. But if you can have a hot start here, you can take care of business at home. You play 7 home games, got to win at least 6 of them, I would say. If you can do that, you give yourself a shot, and anything's possible at that point. If you can get some momentum going, like, who knows? But don't panic because an incredibly talented running back made some plays, because Damon Williams, the best quarterback you're going to play all season, who's a stud athletically, was able to extend the play and make some plays. Like, there still is levels to this. I saw a quote from a Montana player talking about the matchup with Oregon. I think he's a DB, and he's like, God, man, those Oregon receivers are just the fastest people I've ever seen. We came in here with the mentality to compete, proud of laying it all on the line and doing our best to try, but there are levels to this. And like, there is a gap between Washington and CSU. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. It's just the reality that we live in. And to come in and be super overreactionary, to give out a bunch of hot takes based on a performance that was frankly better than expected, I would say, for the most part, that just feels a little short-sighted to me. And I want to see what happens as this defense gets a few more games under their belt, as we see some chemistry and some cohesion develop. I think you'll start seeing a few less of those, broken plays where you have a guy get in the backfield, but, you don't have containment, and then it ends up being an explosive play the other way. Like, I'm hoping, you see less of that as the season goes on. You hope you see a better rapport between BFN and the receiving corps, all that stuff we've talked about for the last hour. But everything is still very much on the table for this team. And I still feel like they have a great opportunity to play for a Mountain West championship. I hope that proves to be the case. Thank you for rocking with us on this Labor Day. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use the code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.